The videos were labeled like evidence, not memories, not Christmas or vacation or Dad's birthday. They had names like Kitchen Entry Attempt 3, Back Hallway, 1:12 a.m., Watching Mom Sleep. At first, I honestly thought my mother had accidentally copied over security footage from somewhere else. My dad got weird near the end of his life. Everybody agreed on that. Paranoid, obsessive, angry about things that didn't make sense. The last 6 months before he died, he stopped sleeping properly. He installed locks nobody asked for, motion lights around the backyard, tiny adhesive strips across windows to see if they'd been opened. My mother used to complain about it constantly. "He needs help," she'd whisper to me in the kitchen while he was outside checking the fence with a flashlight for the 3rd time that night. But my dad never acted scared exactly. That's what bothered me. He acted focused, like somebody trying to solve a problem before time ran out. After the funeral, my mother asked me to clear out his office because she couldn't handle looking at it anymore. That was where I found the hard drives, 7 of them, all numbered, all organized by date, and every single one full of videos, hundreds of hours. I almost deleted everything without checking. I wish I had. The first video I opened showed our kitchen at around 3 a.m. Static camera angle, no sound. Nothing happened at first, just the dark kitchen, the microwave clock glowing green, sink, table, back door. I skipped ahead twice because I thought the file was corrupted. Then somebody walked into frame barefoot. I remember physically freezing in my chair. The man moved slowly through the kitchen like he already knew where everything was. He opened cabinets without looking, took out a glass, filled it with water, drank it, then stood there in the dark for almost a full minute, facing the hallway toward the bedrooms, not moving, just staring. I kept waiting for my dad to walk in. Nobody did. The man eventually returned the glass to the sink and disappeared off camera. The recording continued another hour. Nothing else happened. I replayed the entire thing 3 times before I noticed the timestamp. March 14th, 3 months before my father died. I immediately called my mother. "Did Dad ever install cameras in the kitchen?" Silence. Then, "What?" I told her about the video. At first, she sounded annoyed more than alarmed. "Your father recorded everything near the end. He thought people were coming into the house." "Mom, somebody was in the house." "No," she said instantly, too quickly. "He was sick. I'm literally looking at someone." Another pause, then quieter. "Your father believed a lot of things." She refused to come watch it. That bothered me almost as much as the video itself. I stayed in the office until almost 2 a.m. going through files. Different rooms, different nights. Living room, garage, hallway, backyard. Most showed nothing, but not all of them. Sometimes doors opened slightly. Sometimes shadows crossed rooms. Sometimes objects moved between timestamps. And always, always, the same barefoot man. Never rushing, never stealing anything, just existing inside the house, like he belonged there. The worst footage came from a camera my father had hidden in the hallway outside my parents' bedroom. The man appeared at 2:14 a.m. He walked directly to their bedroom door, opened it slowly, and stood there watching them sleep. For 11 minutes. I timed it. 11 entire minutes. Then he quietly closed the door and walked away. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I drove straight back to my mother's house. I didn't tell her I was coming. When she opened the door, she immediately looked irritated. Then she saw my face. "You watched more of them." It wasn't a question. "Why didn't you call the police?" She turned away instantly. That scared me. Not confusion, not disbelief. Avoidance. "Mom, I don't want to do this again." Again? She rubbed her forehead hard, like she had a headache coming on. "Your father became obsessed with those videos. Every conversation became about noises or footprints or doors being unlocked. I spent months trying to calm him down. There's literally a stranger inside the house." "No, there isn't." I almost yelled at her then. Instead, I pulled out my phone and showed her the hallway footage. She watched maybe 15 seconds before looking away. Her expression changed completely. Not shocked, exhausted, like she'd already seen it too many times. "That could be anyone. It's inside your bedroom. He edited things." "What?" "He learned video software online near the end." I stared at her. "You think Dad faked hundreds of hours of footage?" "I think your father was sick." But she wouldn't look at the screen again. That was when I realized something worse than her not believing me. Part of her did. She just couldn't emotionally survive admitting it. I started visiting the house almost daily after that, partly to help my mother, mostly because I couldn't stop thinking about the footage. I checked every lock myself: windows, garage, basement, crawl spaces. Nothing obvious. No signs of forced entry anywhere. The house itself was old though, built in the 70s. Lots of weird, unfinished areas. Narrow attic sections, storage spaces behind walls. My dad knew every inch of it. And apparently, so did the man. I found newer recordings hidden deeper in the hard drives. Those were different. The camera angles became more aggressive, closer, tracking specific rooms, specific doors. My father had started following patterns. One folder was simply called Tuesdays. Inside were clips from different weeks showing the man entering the house every Tuesday between 1 and 3 a.m. Always through the garage, always barefoot. Always staying at least an hour. Another folder was called When Mom Takes Pills. I opened that one and immediately regretted it. The footage showed my mother asleep on the couch after taking her nighttime medication. At 1:47 a.m., the man entered the room carrying a blanket. He carefully covered her, adjusted the blanket around her shoulders, then sat in the recliner across from her, watching her sleep. Not in a sexual way, not smiling, not angry, just watching. Like somebody sitting beside a hospital bed. I nearly shut the laptop. Instead, I kept watching. At one point, my mother stirred slightly. The man froze instantly. For a second, I thought she was going to wake up and scream. Instead, she just mumbled something half asleep, and the man quietly answered her. I turned the volume up all the way. His voice was barely audible. "It's okay," he whispered. Then, after a pause, "I'm still here." I drove home afterward feeling physically sick. I started locking my apartment door during the daytime. I couldn't stop imagining somebody standing in my kitchen while I slept. The next few days got worse, because once you watch enough footage, you start recognizing things. Body language, habits, the way somebody moves through familiar rooms. The man wasn't young, 40s maybe, possibly older. Same height as my dad, same posture too. And there were moments, brief little moments, where something about him felt horribly familiar. The way he rubbed his jaw while thinking, the way he leaned against counters. I kept telling myself I was imagining similarities because I'd been watching recordings of my father for days. Then I found the garage footage. That changed everything. The camera was positioned near the workbench, timestamp around 4 a.m. My dad enters first, carrying a baseball bat. He looks terrified. Actually terrified. Not paranoid, not angry. Terrified. Then the other man steps out from behind the shelves, and my father says, "You can't keep doing this." The man answers calmly, "You said you'd tell her. I need more time." You had 30 years. 30 years. I remember replaying that line over and over. The camera audio crackled badly, but I heard it clearly every time. My father lowered the bat. The stranger stepped closer into view, and for the first time, I saw his face properly. I felt cold immediately. Not because I recognized him, because I recognized pieces of him. My father's nose, my grandfather's eyes, the shape of my own mouth. I paused the video and just sat there staring. Then the man spoke again. "If they know I exist, your wife dies first." Not shouted, not threatening. Matter of fact, like discussing weather. My father looked completely broken after that. Smaller somehow. "I gave you money." "You gave me silence." "You need help." The man laughed quietly, then said something that bothered me more than the threat. "You stopped being my father a long time ago. I'm just trying to see what replaced me." The recording ended shortly after. I didn't call my mother. I didn't know what to say. Instead, I searched through old family documents until almost dawn. And eventually, I found him. A birth certificate dated 11 years before my parents met. Different woman, different city. Father listed, my dad. I sat there staring at the paper for a long time. My father had another son. Nobody knew. Not me, not my mother. Nobody. Suddenly the videos felt different. Not safer, just sadder. The next week became an obsession. I went through every recording, every folder, every audio note my father left behind. And slowly, the situation became horrifying in a completely different way. The man wasn't trying to hurt us, at least not most of the time. He was trying to live near us. There were recordings of him fixing cabinet hinges, repairing a leaking pipe under the sink, replacing a burned-out garage light. One clip showed him picking up a framed family photo that had fallen face down. He stared at it for a very long time before setting it back carefully. Another showed him standing silently outside my childhood bedroom. There was even footage of him watching old VHS tapes alone in the basement. Birthday parties, Christmas mornings, me learning to ride a bike. He sat there in the dark, watching our family history like somebody mourning his own life. And maybe he was. The audio journals from my father became harder to listen to after that. At first, they were frantic. He's getting bolder. He knows the schedule. He's inside almost every night. But later recordings changed tone completely. He fixed the water heater. I think he's sleeping above the garage. Your mother spoke to him tonight. I don't think she realized. Then, eventually, I don't know what the right thing is anymore. That recording destroyed me. My father sounded exhausted beyond words. Not scared anymore. Defeated. He watches us like he's trying to understand how to become us, he whispered. Then, after a long silence, and sometimes I think he already has. My father died 2 weeks later from a stroke in the driveway. At least, that's what we'd been told. But after everything I'd seen, even that started feeling uncertain. I finally confronted my mother 3 nights later. I brought the birth certificate. She stared at it for less than 5 seconds before sitting down. No surprise, no confusion, just grief. You knew. Tears immediately filled her eyes. He told me near the end. When? After the hospital visit. And you didn't tell me? What was I supposed to say? She snapped suddenly. That your father hid a child for decades? That the man living inside our house was his son? Hearing her say it out loud made my stomach twist. You knew he was there? I met him once. I couldn't even process that. What? He came into the kitchen while I couldn't sleep. When? About a month before your father died. What did you do? She looked away. He made tea. I stared at her. He apologized for frightening me. That somehow disturbed me more than violence would have. What did he want? Her voice became very small. To know what kind of mother I was. I didn't know how to respond to that. He asked questions about you, she continued. About your childhood, about birthdays, school, Christmas traditions. Why didn't you call police? Because your father begged me not to. And you agreed? She looked directly at me then. He was lonely. That sentence stayed with me. Not dangerous, not unstable, lonely. I stopped speaking after that. Because deep down, against all logic, I understood what she meant. That was the worst part of all this. Not the hiding, not the stalking, not the threats, the sympathy. I spent the next few days barely sleeping. Every sound in my apartment made me jump, but another feeling kept growing underneath the fear. Curiosity. I needed to know whether he was still there. So 4 nights later, I went back to the house alone, around midnight. The lights were off except for the kitchen. My mother was staying with my aunt. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The house felt wrong immediately. Not dangerous, occupied. I moved room to room, checking everything. Nothing. Then I heard it. A soft creaking sound overhead, above the garage. I froze. Another creak. Slow movement. I grabbed one of my dad's old flashlights from the counter and walked toward the garage stairs. Every step felt unreal. The attic access above the garage was partially open. I could see darkness inside. And then, a voice. Calm. Tired. You shouldn't be here alone. I nearly dropped the flashlight. The voice sounded so normal. Not monstrous, not threatening, just sad. I pointed the flashlight upward. A man looked down at me from the crawl space, older than I expected, thinner too. His face immediately explained everything. He looked like my father, enough that it hurt. We stared at each other for several seconds. Then he quietly asked, "Did he save the videos?" I couldn't answer. The man nodded slowly anyway. "He thought they'd help you understand." My mouth felt dry. "You threatened to kill my mother." Pain crossed his face instantly. "I said terrible things." "That's not an answer." "I never touched her." "You were living in the house." "I know." His voice cracked slightly on that last word, and suddenly he looked less like an intruder and more like somebody who'd ruined his own life years ago and kept ruining it ever since. I asked the question I'd been terrified to ask. "Did you kill him?" The man looked genuinely shocked. "No." Then quietly, "I loved him too much for that." Silence filled the garage. I realized then that I didn't know what I wanted him to say. He climbed partially down from the crawl space, not aggressively, slowly. "I only wanted to see what my life would have looked like," he said. "You don't get to do that." "I know." "You terrorized us." "I know." "You watched us sleep." At that, he looked ashamed for the first time. "I'm sorry." And somehow that made everything worse, because he meant it. I asked him why he stayed after being discovered. His answer still bothers me. "Because your father finally started talking to me." I didn't know what to say after that. Then he asked something quietly. "How angry are you allowed to be before you become cruel?" I remember just staring at him, because it sounded less like a defense and more like a genuine question he'd been asking himself for years. Eventually, he climbed back into the darkness above the garage, and I let him. I still don't fully understand why. Maybe because calling the police suddenly felt too simple for what this actually was. Maybe because I kept imagining him alone in that crawl space, watching another family live the life he never got. Or maybe because some part of me inherited my father's weakness. Before disappearing fully into the darkness, he said one last thing. "If you tell your mother I'm gone, she'll sleep better." Then he closed the hatch. I stood there for a long time afterward, listening. Nothing. No movement, no footsteps. Eventually, I left. I told myself I'd call the police in the morning. I never did. 3 months have passed since then. My mother sold the house last week. The new owners are renovating the garage. Yesterday, one of the contractors called me because they found something hidden in the crawl space. Not weapons, not photographs, not stolen things. A box of old VHS tapes. Every tape labeled carefully in black marker. Family.